Hello, I'm Pearl Jane Mabe, and I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Webinars are brought to you as a membership benefit of Heritage Ohio. Heritage Ohio's mission is, of course, to help people save the places that matter, build community, live better. Today, we'll have a presentation on the path to becoming a Main Street. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the question box at any time. Most issues with the webinar software will be solved if you close the program and restart it with the link that was sent to you. Our presenter today is Frances Jo Hamilton, Director of Revitalization at Heritage Ohio. Jo has been with Heritage Ohio since August 2016, prior to which she served 9 years as Executive Director for Main Street, Delaware. She started as a humble volunteer trying to better her community before moving up to committee and board responsibilities. And with that, I'll hand this over to Jo.
Good afternoon, everybody. We've got a really nice crowd this afternoon. As with any webinar that I do, I'm super disappointed that you're all not in the room with me. It's really hard to give a presentation to a room full of just Pearl. But I'm super grateful that Pearl is here and manage the, my screen is not progressing. Of course, we're having trouble already. 2 seconds. There we go. All right. So first of all, we'll talk a little bit about Heritage Ohio. As Pearl already said, our mission is to save the places that matter, build community, and to live better. I'm never in a community that this statement doesn't hold true for them as well. So I feel like it's, you're fine. I feel like it's a really great mission for us to be working under in all of the work that we do across the state of Ohio. So first of all, we work in revitalization. We provide technical assistance to communities. One of the things that I love most about working for a nonprofit organization is that I don't have to hold anything too close to my chest. I receive phone calls on a daily basis, actually, from communities that are looking to do downtown revitalization, that might be struggling with zoning, downtown events and activities, and it's just really great to work for an organization that I can send them whatever materials they might need at any time. We also manage the Ohio Main Street program. At this point, we have 33 full Main Street programs, and then we have a whole host of affiliate level programs. And we operate on a 4-point approach in those communities to help them with downtown revitalization. Heritage Ohio also works in preservation with our Top Opportunities program, our Historic Theaters Initiative, Preservation Easement program, and we also provide one-on-one advice and consultation when it comes to historic preservation across the state. We do a lot of advocacy work. Joyce Barrett, our executive director, I can't say enough about her and the work that she does with our legislative communities and the things that are really important in our communities when it comes to things like the Ohio Preservation Tax Credit and the Federal Historic Tax Credit. Joyce does a lot of work in order to back those programs and make sure that the support is there when communities need it for downtown revitalization as well. So the Ohio's Main Street program is actually part of a nationwide movement under the National Main Street Center and then National Trust for Historic Preservation and Main Street America. So each community that is a part of our organization has their own private nonprofit. However, they're all part of this nationwide network that includes the whole United States, and we're all sort of working toward the same end. The Main Street approach is a comprehensive approach. The 4 points are design, organization, promotion, and economic vitality. However, all of those silos in which that work is accomplished is focused upon transformation strategies and goals that are set at the board level in order to give a real pointed approach to that community and exactly what they need in order to revitalize their downtown. So we'll talk a little bit about the path to becoming a Main Street community. There are two ways that communities can come into the Ohio Main Street program. The first of which is to just join as a downtown affiliate. The affiliate level membership is just shy of $1,000 a year, and any community that would like to apply, it's a simple application process and a matter of dues, and then they receive certain benefits through Heritage Ohio, including things like a once a year half-day retreat type session, board development. All those things can be tailored to exactly what that community might need. And then if that community that is a downtown affiliate would like to become or make application to be a full Ohio Main Street program, they have to have a downtown assessment resource team visit in order to do that. Of course, communities that would like to do their assessment resource team visit first will receive a downtown affiliate level program comp to them with that visit. So the DART visit is a 2-day visit. You'll see on your screen now a sample DART agenda. So we bring in a team to communities. Usually there are 4 of us. A lot of times it's staff from the Heritage Ohio office. However, we will bring in other executive directors or maybe even our board members to fulfill any sort of expertise that that particular community might need. So we sort of handpick and build those teams based on the community's needs. On the first day, we arrive in the community and we do a sort of self-guided tour. So we want to get somewhat of an unbiased look at that particular community. We visit shops and do a walking tour of the downtown, take a ton of photos, and then we get the opportunity to meet with the stakeholders for a stakeholder lunch. So during that particular lunch, we gather with stakeholders from that community and just sort of glean as much information as we can from them. Have they had fits and starts of downtown revitalization efforts over the years? What are the challenges? How involved is the community? What's the business mix look like? What are the struggles that they have with historic preservation or building owners in their downtown? So we spread out amongst the stakeholders for that lunch and sort of glean as much information as we can. And then we get an opportunity for a stakeholder guided tour. So I always tell communities that I want to see everything that you're proud of, but we also want to see all the things that you hope that nobody sees when they come to town. What are the things that are holding you back, and what are the things that you want to stand behind? And then the team spends about 2 hours working over dinner in order to sort of sculpt our community presentation. And the community presentation time is probably one of my favorite portions of this project. Over the last couple of years, we've sort of tweaked this process a little bit, and now communities get an opportunity to work in small groups and actually design their ideal downtown. So when we're talking to communities, we always, we want to know what they think the struggles are, and so many times those things, for instance, parking always comes up, are things that they would never think to pay attention to in the communities that they visit for vacation. So we want communities to start to look at their own downtown with the same amount of grace that they would give to a community that they're visiting on vacation. When we leave our communities to go somewhere else, we're never thinking about how far away did we have to park, or did they just put in a new parking garage. We're not visiting the brand new big box store in that community. Usually we're going there for the individuality and the eclectic nature of those communities, and finding places that we love to spend our time and that we want to be in for a long period of time. So we hope that the community presentation and engagement is an opportunity for those community members to really think about what they would like to see in their downtowns. One of the actual activities that we did, one of the communities said that they wanted a zip line in their downtown, which I thought was really great to think that far out of the box. So we want communities to really think about what kind of potential do they have, because we so often get into this diatribe of saying, well, that'll never work here. So we want them to think about what could possibly work here. Then on day 2, we spend another 3 hours meeting with the core stakeholders. I always feel like maybe this is too much time, but then when we get into this conversation, 3 hours goes by really quick. Everybody's sort of been bombarded with a lot of material over the last day, and so that day 2 session just gets all those questions answered, and since the community at that point will be waiting about a month or 2 in order to receive their finished plan for the next year, they're usually pretty pumped about actually doing something right now. So we want to be able to answer any questions that they might have or give them materials right away to get those really quick early wins and to pull in anybody that's really interested in becoming involved so that we don't lose momentum. And then we do a return visit. Once the report is completed, then I generally come back to that community and spend another half day with them. And this is a really active meeting. So we're working through work plans, talking specifically about at least a project or 2 so that I can leave them with the starts of a work plan. Also talking really deep in the organization end of things. I feel like if your admin piece isn't put together, then your stuff's just never going to work. So making sure that that board of directors is getting put together in under a certain amount of intentionality, and what needs to be on that first board meeting agenda, and can I get that date set before I leave the community. So the second visit is usually a 3 or 4 hour visit in which we're doing some really active hands-on items in order for those stakeholders to feel like they have a strong handle on what comes next. And then of course with their downtown affiliate membership, they get another half-day visit within that year, so they can use that. I encourage them to wait about 6 months or so in order to make sure that they have their board in place. Maybe we do some board development or some strategic planning and goal setting at that second visit. So here's a list of our Ohio Main Street and affiliate level communities. I feel like the affiliates are growing all the time, and then that jump from being a downtown affiliate to a full Ohio Main Street program does have certain requirements, which we'll cover later on. So going back to building the organization and being super intentional about that, it's difficult in the very beginning to put together that board of directors because we can't foster up those volunteers at the ground level. We kind of have to have applications and think about who we want around that leadership table without the ability to actually train those leaders up first. So ideally, after the organization is set, then we want to bring in all the people that we know and then hopefully pull them in as members and then trustees and bring them into committees and then onto the board. However, we have to think about how best to do that with a brand new board of directors, and how can we still be super intentional about who comes around that table and giving a full reflection of the community when we do build that board of directors. So the Main Street program works on 8 principles. The first is a comprehensive approach. We talk about there's never a silver bullet. There's never one big thing that you can do in your community that's going to make long-term impact or complete that downtown revitalization task, if you will. So making sure that it's beautiful, making sure that all those historical elements that everybody likes to see are there, but really it has to be comprehensive. We have to think about the buildings, the businesses, the people, how to get people to visit, how to get them to come back on a routine basis. We really have to retrain all of those humans to come back into our downtowns. It also relies on quality. So I tell communities all the time, if you are doing 60 flower planters or baskets in your downtown and half of them are dead, then stop doing 60 flower baskets. Let's scale back and do better. Make sure that we have the capacity with which to do the things that we've agreed to do. And maybe it's not a matter of saying, no, we can't do that, but saying we just don't have the capacity to do that yet. So any program, project, event, or activity that does not have the adequate leadership or support to have that particular project completed, it should be tabled until we do, so that we can operate at that super high level all the time. The Main Street program is a meaningful public and private partnership. These partnerships do not work in communities where your city is not behind you. I love to go into meetings. I was just in Xenia on Monday, and the city manager that was there, the assistant city manager was there, the mayor was there. Those are really telltale signs for me about community support. And just like this page from Marietta's website, our partnership with the city of Marietta is vital to our successes downtown. You cannot run a Main Street program without everybody being on board, and that's why we want to build that well-rounded board of directors and involve all of those key entities. So one of the programs from Delaware that I always talk about, which was one of my favorite days, was the installation of our downtown Christmas tree. When I took my position in Delaware, I asked immediately, you know, how do I get the downtown Christmas tree installed? And everybody said, don't worry about the tree, it will come. Well, that's super hard for somebody that needs to know how everything happens. But ideally, every year, somebody called and said, I have an overgrown Christmas tree in my yard. Would you like to come and take it for the organization? So the city of Delaware would go and cut down that Christmas tree. A private resident almost always donated the tree. Warner Metal Works actually built this nice heavy tree stand that you see us lifting into place. The corner lot on which the tree always set was owned by a private building owner. We lost a building to a fire there, and for the longest time it was just sort of we called it the grassy knoll, because it was just a grassy patch with a hole in the ground for the Christmas tree. But then a building owner in town purchased that corner lot and called me immediately and said, I understand that the Delaware Main Street Christmas tree goes on this particular lot every year, and what can I do to make that easier for you? So he built this terrific tree hole. We have electricity in the hole, so we don't have to run extension cords anymore. The tree stand, we were constantly fighting with the tree falling over. You see Oberfields here craning everything into place for us. So, you know, it's a public and private partnership that's absolutely bringing all of these entities together to make sure that something so simple as a Christmas tree goes into the downtown. But the city reaps a large reward from having a Main Street program in their community as well. Most of the time, communities, when we look at their volunteer hours, it would take often 3 full-time city employees to replace the volunteer hours that are actually put in by the Main Street program in any particular community. This is a photo of a couple of my volunteers in Delaware scrubbing city sidewalks. Every year we pull out 2-inch fire hoses. The fire department comes down and puts adapters onto the fire hydrants. When I took my job initially, my grandma said to me, Francis Joe, why are the fire departments not coming down and actually hosing off the sidewalks? That's what they used to do when I was a little girl. So right away I called up Chief Donahue and talked to him about fitting some 2.5-inch fire hoses and letting volunteers wield hoses and brooms in the downtown in order to do a street cleaning every spring. So this is a great way that, and a great example of how city is making use of private entity to do things that would otherwise be left up to city staff in the downtown. It involves changing attitudes. Attitude is a little thing that makes a really big difference, and nobody's harder on a community than the people who actually live there. Even to this day, I have people say, yeah, that was pretty great for Delaware. And it's one of those statements that just makes me so angry that we are so degrading to our own communities. So we really have to change our own attitudes and the attitudes of the people who are using our downtowns to make sure that everybody's on that same positive page. This was our mayor at the time, who had a really great sense of humor and was willing to do all kinds of crazy things to get people to think a little bit different about our downtown. So this was our Paint the Town Pink evening. Wendell's sweet little wife didn't really want to walk next to him that night, but they had a great time in the downtown. It focuses on existing assets. One of the things I love about the Main Street program is that we're not trying to create a cookie cutter atmosphere in all of our communities. We want all communities to be exactly who they are. When I have a new community come to me and they say, we want to be just like fill in the blank, that's really discouraging to me. I want communities to be exactly who they are at all times, and part of that is figuring out who they are in the first place and then building on those assets. So the bottom left-hand photo I'll talk a little bit about. This is Vermilion. They bring their Santa Claus in every year on a boat into the harbor. So, you know, that's something that's specifically Vermilion. It couldn't just happen anywhere. So we like to see communities being really individual, and the Main Street program ebbs and flows and stretches and moves to suit all communities and all sizes of communities. The Main Street program is a self-help program. One of the reasons why I got so hooked into Main Street is because it gives you an opportunity to actually do things. I've sat in my fair share of worthless meetings through my life, 2 and 3 hours where you're screaming inside your own head because it's the same things you talked about last month. But most of our Main Street communities are operating at a little bit higher capacity than that, and so we're working really hard to make sure that those meetings are super meaningful, but that they're always followed up with action items and things that people can actually do. And one of the things that we say to new communities is, I want you to do something right away that is press releasable. I don't care if you painted a bench a nice fun color, we want you to take a photo and write a press release and send it out statewide to as many media sources as you can. Put your name on something that the community can point to and say, we did that. One of my favorites, this community actually got a donation of brooms for all of their downtown merchants, and the most favorite part about this is the little card that you see on the bottom of the broom. There is actually instructions on how to use it. So we're in a lot of communities where you know, these programs haven't really been implemented, and the unfortunate part is the small business owners are usually in their spaces by themselves on a routine basis. They park behind their building, they come in the back door, and often they unlock the front door and never walk out the front door. So we want to actually help those business owners as well to start to think about themselves in a little different way, making sure that their sidewalks are clear, that nobody's wading through a pile of leaves in order to get into their front door. And you know, part of that is building the community and making sure that everybody knows where their responsibilities lie. And really, there's nothing more endearing to me than to sit on a sidewalk bench early in the morning with a coffee and to see merchants outside sweeping their sidewalks before they actually open their doors. It's just one of those really endearing portions of the kind of work that I get to do. The Main Street program and downtown revitalization is incremental in nature. You will never check off your list downtown revitalization. It's something that ebbs and flows and changes. You might get to where you are at full occupancy on the ground level, and maybe even on your upper floor levels. Maybe all your buildings have been touched and maintained and are being well cared for at this point, but we're still working constantly in downtown revitalization. Even our programs that have been around 30 plus years, those programs just become more and more mature all the time, and the work is constantly different and changing, but it's something that never ends, so we don't check it off a list. And it's implementation oriented. As I said before, it's all about just picking up something and actually doing something. My daughter was raised under a Main Street table, and I'm super proud to say that, you know, getting families involved and communities involved in full in their downtown revitalization is really important, and one of the things that makes it so much fun, and it goes so far as to getting volunteers on a long-term basis. So a little bit about the Main Street structure. Typical nonprofit board of directors, you have 4 committees typically that are working under the board of directors. Hopefully communities are working toward having a program manager. Communities that are doing this and doing it really well will find the need for a paid staff person. It does need to be somebody's job eventually to sort of oversee and work with the board of directors to make sure that all these things are being implemented. The 4-point approach, you'll see, you know, these types of graphics a lot where marketing or promotion, economic vitality, organization and design, they sort of all bleed into each other. So we want the work to be with the people who are capable of doing that actual project. So in any given community, if say that somebody's doing an upper floor tour and that would typically fall with their design committee, well, maybe most of their building owners are on the economic vitality committee, and maybe it would make better sense for that program to actually live in a different committee. So as I said before, it really ebbs and flows and allows for each community to use their strengths where they lie and not worry so much about particulars when it comes to where things should live with the organization. So organization is your first committee. Building a strong foundation for the organization is super important, making sure you have policies and procedures in place. One of the things that I talk the most about is about protecting your volunteers, terms and term limits for board members, and then succession planning for any leader that takes on a leadership role in the organization. And then of course, looking at our funding structure and how, you know, how does the fundraising piece work in order to financially support the organization. The next committee is design. We want to enhance the downtown physical elements. We want to make our downtown some place where people want to come and be for a long time. Everybody knows of a space that they love to go to, and they'd be perfectly happy and could easily let 3 or 4 hours slip away sitting there. And we hope that our downtowns start to fall into that third place category for people when it comes to where do we want to spend time. But we also realize that our physical structures have a lot to do with that. Historic downtowns have a soul, and we want to protect the historic preservation piece is super important, and the design committee can go a long way in educating and protecting those historic structures in our downtown. Promotion, especially in communities that are struggling, the promotions committee can put on events and activities and projects and programs that will start to bring people back into the downtown on a routine basis. It's great to have a really huge festival in your community once a year, but frankly, that's not training anyone to do anything other than a whole slew of volunteers that are spending 6 months of their life planning for a 2-day event. What we'd like to see is routine, regular events in our downtowns. That's why things like farmers markets and First Fridays absolutely work, never fail in most communities. That constant thought that if I go downtown on First Friday anytime throughout the year, then I know something's going to be happening. I don't even have to make plans with my friends because they will all be there already. Those are the kinds of things that we want to see. When people stop reading the promotional materials, they just see those visual cues that tell them that it's First Friday or it's farmers market time, and then they just start instinctively going into the downtown. So promotion can go a long way to bringing into the downtown maybe the entities that are missing at that time to help give people something to do in the downtown. And then economic vitality. We all have bricks and mortar businesses in our downtowns, and regardless of how many are there now, we want to absolutely build up and foster and edify those bricks and mortar businesses as much as we can. So focusing on our existing businesses, even when it comes to expansion, we want to talk to our existing businesses first, and then go outside our community to specifically recruit the businesses that might be complementary to the businesses that are there, or that might fit well into the buildings that we can provide. And then, of course, bringing in other items too, like supporting downtown housing, making sure that your building department is adequately versed on the alternate building code so that we can put our buildings to the best uses possible. So the board of directors is focused in leadership, planning, funding, and personnel. First of all, we want to look at who's around our board table, and it sounds a whole lot easier than it really is, but getting a full reflection of your community around that table is really important. So we want ethnic and minority groups to be represented. We want government and agencies to be represented. I remember one time I was looking around my board table because we were not being specifically productive for a long period of time, and I started making a list of all of the people that used to be around my table that were really super productive, and realized that they were all women. And then I looked at my board table and they were all men. I had no women around my table. So even looking just at your male and female ratios can sometimes be a big jump toward making sure that things happen. Our women are our worker bees usually, and that's super important to look at. So we want a full reflection of our community around our table, and then we also have to look at what kinds of skills do we need around the table. I'm going to need an attorney, I'm going to need a realtor, a building owner, a business owner, and I say A before each of those things because we also don't want the board to be too strongly tipped in one direction or the other, so that it doesn't become any one faction's agenda that's getting accomplished, but rather the agenda of the organization as a whole. Building and training up leaders is super important. We want leaders that are going to have a positive attitude and that can manage meetings and keep on task, help to build work plans and carry out those programs and projects. But as I said before, we also want to have a process in place that is constantly training new leaders. I really don't like to see a committee or a project leader in place for any longer than 3 years. People become super attached to the things that they do. And so we want to give them an opportunity to train new people to take over those roles so that all of our projects are constantly being refreshed. And when it's a dead duck, then it's time to let it go. And sometimes that's super hard if somebody's been doing the same project for 25 years. So building leadership and building the organization through constant changeover of leadership is in my opinion, one of the most important things, structurally speaking. So the board of directors is in charge of the planning. They should be setting the mission for the organization. They should be establishing the transformation strategy for the organization, of course, with the input of the community and their committees. And then they should also set the goals. So 1, 2, or 3 major goals a year for the organization. And then those 3 things should be handed down to the committees for work planning and implementation. So all of the committees will be working in one direction toward the outcomes and the impact that we want to see based on the goals that have been set at the board level. So the committees will receive that mission, the transformation strategy, and those goals, and then they commit to the creative work of establishing programs, events, projects, activities that will satisfy those, and then putting together work plans, making sure that everything that we're doing is going into a well-organized work plan, and then those work plans are actually turned into the board for approval. Now, I always tell boards that they're not to get into the weeds and start deciding, well, we'd rather have yellow t-shirts rather than green ones. That's not the kind of work that we want our board of directors doing, and we don't want to take the creativity out of the boards or out of the committee's hands. So, but the board is going to look at, do we have the capacity to do this at the top quality level that we expect, and do we have the budget to actually carry out this plan, and if we don't have the budget, then how is that committee actually going to raise the budget funds, or are they going to expect the board to sort of tap into and help raise those funds? But once the work plans are approved, they're handed back to the committees, and then the committees are carrying out those approved work plans. One of the great things about this is then all of the work for the year is set before the first of the year begins every year, and we don't get distracted with what I call shiny object projects. Everybody has the person that walks into your Main Street office and says, I have the next greatest idea, something that you should implement. So I love to just hand out a blank work plan to those folks and say, it sounds like a great idea, put together a preliminary work plan and come to a committee meeting. However, our work has already been set for 2019, and so this would probably be a 2020 project for us. You'll find really great volunteers that way, because the person who actually fills out that work plan and comes to the meeting is probably going to be super productive and a potential leader in your organization. However, if the work plan never comes back to you, then nobody can ever say that you said no. We don't want to say no, we just want to say not now, and not be distracted by those things that pop up routinely. And then we want to evaluate everything. So in 5 years, when I talk to a board of directors or a committee and they say, well, we tried that project and it didn't work, I want to know why. I want to be able to look back at the evaluation and say, well, the reason that it didn't work is because it was 105 degrees outside that day. Or, the reason it didn't work is because we didn't have the funding in place. Or the tent company who said they were going to donate the tents for that at the last minute sent us a $500 bill, and that's why we didn't make any money. So evaluations are super important, especially if we're constantly turning over leaders, and then we can look back and see why something didn't work, and hopefully re-implement if it might work at a later time. I talk a lot about the health of organizations to communities, especially new communities coming into the program. Establishing terms and term limits for board members is a super important thing to do. I always say, 2 terms of 3 years each is pretty ideal, but then board members should have to term off for a year, give other people an opportunity to come in and serve. And every great organization always says, yes, but we don't want to lose those really great people. Well, you're going to lose them anyway if you don't give them a break, and you're never fostering new, really great volunteers or giving them an opportunity to take on leadership roles if no one ever leaves. So we do have to have a constant rotation, but we're never saying goodbye totally to our volunteers. The Main Street program has plenty of work to go around, and there are plenty of places, even in leadership roles, for board members to step into off of the board for that year. I always think about how fast a year goes by. It doesn't take any time at all. And then those board members can make application and potentially come back onto the board after they've taken their year off. And then also implementing succession plans for all leaders, all of your project leaders, committee leaders, chairpersons should always have a plan for succession, choosing a co-chair to lead the second year that you're in that seat, and then handing things off totally to your co-chair. So then really that person is only in somewhat of a leadership role for about 3 years is the ideal. It fosters relationships with leaders and with your volunteers, and once again, evaluate. We don't want to just evaluate our programs and projects, but we also want our volunteers to constantly evaluate themselves and evaluate the organization. The question I always like to ask myself is, am I getting out of being here what I expected or what I had hoped? Sometimes people think that they know what they're joining up for, and then after you really get into something, it can be a lot different. So are your volunteers happy where they are? The health of the organization is as much about the health of your volunteers as anything. And if the board of directors and the top leaders, the executive director, the board chair are not focused on the health of those leaders and the volunteers within the organization, then you will find yourself floundering. I always get asked about funding. How do Main Street programs get funded? This is the ideal. We do not like to see more than 50% of anyone's budget coming from any one singular source. The reason for that is simple financial stability. If an organization is receiving more than 50% of their budget from one source and that source goes away, then it threatens the longevity of the organization. So typically we like to see a third come from public funding, which is usually your city or municipality support. Sometimes communities get county support. And then a third from your stakeholder support, which would be like memberships or partnerships. And then a third from earned income. So how can we plug in some ticketed events or merchandise sales at that committee level with the events and activities that we're doing in order to put a few earned income events and activities throughout the year work plan. So I always like to throw in our reinvestment statistics to any presentation that we do. The thing that I like to point out the most is the reinvestment ratio, that for every dollar that goes into a Main Street program, it's about $31 that's returned out of the program for that $1 donation. So I would challenge you to find anything else in your community that's giving you this kind of return on investment when it comes to volunteer time and how much return you can get into your community for those investments. The Ohio Main Street program, as I said before, does have certain requirements above our downtown affiliate level programs. So in order to make application, these things have to be in place. They have to have a paid professional manager. I love to throw in that word professional in there because we encourage our communities to pay a professional wage. It's really important that we not be filtering people in and out. When you hire an executive director for a Main Street program, they're already at the ceiling. There's no promotion there for them, so we want to keep them happy and make sure that we're reimbursing them adequately for the amount of work that goes into this job. Work plans for boards and committees, an active and operating and constantly changing and growing work plan is super important. Ongoing training for your manager, board, and volunteers. Heritage Ohio provides 4 revitalization trainings a year. We do a state conference every fall, and then there is a national conference each year. So there are plenty of training opportunities along with things like these monthly webinars that we also put on. So we want to help our organizations train their volunteers and their board members, and that the ongoing training for the manager is a requirement for our full Ohio Main Street programs. And then the full Main Street programs also go through a half-day annual evaluation. Those criteria come down to us from the National Main Street Center, and each program that actually hits a level of excellence at that annual evaluation can be nationally accredited as well. And a grassroots commitment. I love for volunteers to know exactly what they're signing up for. So making sure that board members are signing board member commitment letters and everybody's on the same page about why we've come around this table and what kind of work needs to be done. So at this time, I'll take any questions. My contact information is here. I'd be happy to answer any questions one-on-one as well. As you can see, my cell phone number is listed. Happy to answer a quick text message even. So if that's your preferred form of communication, happy to do that as well. But feel free to reach out to me at any time. And I'm going to go to Pearl and see if we have any questions.
Well, like she said, feel free to type in your questions at this point. It looks like we have one or two. I'm just going to reach out really quick, and Eddie Benner, it looks like you began typing a question, but I don't have the end of it. So if you'd like to finish that question, I will move to the next one for now. So first question, is there a download of the PowerPoint available? Yes, we will have the PowerPoint presentation available. You just, when you get a copy of the recording, just say I'd like the presentation and we will get that out to you. Wait a few more minutes for any additional questions. Please go ahead and type them in at this time. All right, we have another question. So Joe, this question is from John. My struggle right now is getting people to understand the need for a formal program. What can I do?
First of all, John, I'm happy to come to any community that's maybe concerned about or considering starting a formal program in your community. Most time, communities that don't have formal programs set up that are focused on downtown revitalization, it often falls back onto the downtown merchants to actually do a lot of these things in the downtown or the city. So a formal organization that's actually set up to build up and foster volunteerism and community leadership is super important. And I think that you could probably reference just about any Main Street community and see where they've had sort of fits and starts on downtown revitalization without a formal organization in place. But again, I'd be happy to come and talk to you and your stakeholders or your city council, whatever I can do to be of assistance and encourage the community to sort of put that organization in place.
All right. Let's see if there are any other questions. Just type them in at this time. And we'll give everybody just a moment. Okay, here we go. So, Joe, we are the Downtown Mantua Revitalization Corporation. This is Eddie, which is a small town consisting of a population of 1,000. We have had an active revitalization committee for 10 years. We were wondering if there has been discussion about a smaller Main Street program for smaller towns.
So everybody always asks me about town size, and really the size of the community does not matter. What you're doing for downtown revitalization is the same in every community, regardless of size. We have to focus on all 4 points. We have to have a board of directors, all of those entities that would make it seem like maybe a smaller community would need less really isn't necessarily true. So Millersburg right now is our smallest community. They're less than 5,000 people, and they're running a full Main Street program, and they actually just in the last year and a half hired their part-time executive director to actually start working full-time. So you know, even those small communities start to see that the capacity needs to be there, even regardless of how small that community might be.
And just to add to what Joe said, if you cannot start at a Main Street level, there is always the downtown affiliate program if your community just is seeking the ability to, you know, find those resources that we provide and come to trainings. And it looks like we are out of questions. With that, I would like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar, and of course, Jo for her thorough overview of how to become a Main Street program. And for our upcoming events, you can find them on heritageohio.org. And, enjoy this lovely summer day, everybody. Have a good one.